Hello, people. How's it going? I mostly chose that book for the cover and for the thing instead. I read it. It's quite interesting. Kind of agree with him. That's the point. But what is censorship? What are trigger words? Well, we already know what literature is. We live in the age now where you have to be careful what you say because it might trigger somebody. Okay, suicide, which I have been contemplated twice in my lifetime. So to me, it's not a trigger word. It's a fact. Killing yourself is a fact. It's an unfortunate, unpleasant reality that people do this. A lot of reasons people do it. Sometimes they don't make sense. But when you're a writer, you shouldn't feel you have to censor it, even YouTube. But this is about writing. So I've never understood the trigger word thing. I really do think it's a cop out to avoid dealing with real life issues, real life writing. Literature should be about the problem that it is with censorship, or with trigger words dictating what you write about or you don't write about. I mean, the world is a nice place, a good place, and it's also a corrupt place and an evil place. Humans are good, they're evil. Humans are a lot of things. They're a combination of a whole bunch of screwed up human nature at its best and worst. Sorry, texting. I shouldn't be checking on the web, checking more. Anyway, I didn't think it was important. But trigger words in this day and age, unfortunately, stop doing that. Silly phone. I think trigger words have just become an excuse for people to not deal with reality, to not deal with good literature, good writing. It's basically why companies like Hollywood and Disney and a few other companies that create all these terrible TV shows and all these terrible movies because they're terrified of creativity. Creativity is stifled when censorship is either imposed by others or even as a writer yourself. It stifles, it destroys, it corrupts. It makes literature boring. Now, if there are trigger words and they bother you, well, then don't read it. Period. But you have no business telling anybody else what they can and cannot read. I mean, there are a lot of look. I have dealt with my own writing. I have dealt with suicide. I have dealt with murder. I have done with everything you could probably think of. And you know what? It's called reality. These are realities of life. That's what a writer is supposed to deal with, the realities of things. Sex is a reality. People have sex. That's where other humans come from. I know it's shocking. They don't just metamorphosize out of nothing. They exist because people have sex. Now, if you are going to apply censorship to yourself, you should only apply it to yourself. See, when I write my stuff, there are certain words I will not use. There are just certain words I will not use because I don't use them in the real world. And there are certain words I don't want to use, even if I'm describing a terrible human being. There are certain words I just can't bring myself to write because they're trigger words to me. Doesn't mean that I should not use them, though. A writer who gets in the way of his own writing and that thinking like that isn't going to write anything worth reading. To me, trigger words, unfortunately, I keep coming back to this because to me, anything can be a trigger word. That's why I don't believe in them, because anything is a trigger word now. Everything is a trigger word now. If it upsets people, it's a trigger word. Oh, if it makes them feel bad, it's a trigger word. Welcome to life, particularly life as a writer. If you're going to write about sex, and you're going to write about violence to women or anybody else for that matter, if you're going to write as suicide or deleting oneself, which sounds ridiculous, by the way. Okay, you're not a Cyberman. Cybermen delete other people. Humans do something else to other people or themselves. But I believe in dealing with reality when you're writing. you're going to write a story, and I have written several stories on the subject of deleting. I just think it's silly. I'm mocking it because I'm mocking it. But you know what? People do it. That's what people do when they get depressed, when they get unhappy. They do things to themselves. They hurt themselves. They do a lot. A writer is supposed to deal with reality, not hide and bury your head in the sand because the words hurt your feelings. Reality doesn't care about your feelings. It really doesn't. Just like, facts don't care about your feelings, neither does reality. Life is hard. That's what writers write. They write about life that's hard, dealing with real issues. Trigger words don't belong in the real world because they don't make sense. And they certainly don't make sense in literature. When you're writing a good story, you shouldn't be afraid to use words that are going to offend other people. Sorry, if the story requires you to offend other people, well, that's what the story is there for. It's supposed to. I offend people all the time. You know why? Because I want them to think. I write what I write because I want people to think. That's why I try. I really do believe most people who are offended by trigger words or anything else I can think of is because what I'm writing requires them to think. And people don't like to think. If you watch some of the stuff that's on TV now, on streaming and this, that, and the other, it's crap. It's so carefully written to the point where the characters are usually one-dimensional. They have one characteristic, and they exist in a bubble. The slightest little prick will destroy. Censorship is bad. I don't agree with censorship. I think you should write what you want to write and what you want to write. And yeah, I grant you, there are words I cannot use, even though to create the characters I want to create, those words have to be used. I just don't like them personally. I mean, the N-word offends me. The N-word will always offend me. And I have a very hard time convincing myself to use that word in stories when I'm trying to talk about race relations. Is it censorship? Yeah. Is it good censorship? Maybe. It all depends on why I really want to use the word. Because I read a lot of literature, this, that, and the other, and it's praise to the hilts. And there are a whole lot of words in it that I think, does it really need to be there? Now, if you're dealing with real life issues, real life stories, yeah, they need to be there. There are racists out there. There are bigots out there. There are homophobes out there. There are people who hate other people out there. There are people out there who cannot stand this, that, and the other about other people or about people in general. Trigger words are a lot of way of just avoiding dealing with reality. If you are afraid to deal with reality of things, don't be a writer. Don't try to write anything. Don't attempt to write anything. Don't even be a writer. Just keep it all to yourself and don't bother people with your inability to deal with the fact that, a word offends you. A lot of words offend me. Tons of words offend me, probably. But they don't offend me enough to say, They don't offend me enough to forget to think rationally and logically. If a word offends you to the point where you cannot rationally deal with it, that's a you problem, not a me problem. I mean, I like using the N-word example because to me it's one of the most egregious words there is. It is. It is one of those words that, yes, if you're creating a racist character, if you're trying to create a racist moment, it makes sense to use it. I would still struggle to use it. I would still have a problem using it. I would try to figure out some way to get around actually saying the actual word. But that ruins the story. If you want a writer to make sense, you're asking the wrong guy. Writers are at a conflict a lot of times, I think. They censor themselves without realizing they're censoring themselves. They want to create this story with this absolute evil human being, but won't really go all the way. See, I think a lot of the reasons I have a lot of stuff I've written lately have bothered me, or at least a lot of it, well, probably bothers me off and on, at least over the few years, I guess, is that I feel like I'm censoring myself. As if somehow the trigger word corruption is creeping into my own writing and I don't like it. There are evil people out there. There are evil people in the world. Excuse me. Literature should be about exposing evil people for what they are and who they are. It should be about life. It should be about the real world if you're writing stories about people. And you know what I mean. Slices of life, actual. I'm probably not explaining this very well. And I'm probably not, but my whole point is that I think trigger words are an excuse to hide behind not wanting to deal with the real world and not wanting to deal with reality and real issues and real people and this, that, and the other, which is why the programs on Netflix and Disney and this, that, and the other are crap because they don't deal with real people. They don't deal with real anything. They're not even good stories anymore. I'm just talking about the slice of life ones. I'm not talking about the science fiction ones or the others. I'm talking about the ones that are dealing with just people being people. And they're either tropes, which is just another word for, in my mind, censorship and avoiding trigger words. Writing should be about reaching into the human brain and the human heart and the human everything, ripping out all that crap that's in there, exposing people for what they are, either good or bad. Trigger words are about, well, no, let's not talk about that. Look, I have been suicidal in my life. I've wanted to kill myself a few times in my life because I've got so depressed that life just wasn't worth it. Sorry, those words don't trigger me. When I hear other people talking about it or they mention the word, I'm not triggered. You know why? Because I'm not. I'm an adult. I act like one. I act like a rational, logical human being who realizes, yeah, people feel that way. I have felt that way. I've never, I know that YouTube doesn't like the word being used, but guess what? That's the real world. And I know YouTube really isn't the real world, not really. But I think writing should be about reality when dealing with people, when dealing with issues, dealing with any issues of human life. I mean, I think the problem with a lot of today's writing is censorship is now called avoiding trigger words. So we don't offend anybody, so they don't think, let alone don't feel anything. I mean, a lot of writing is just bland and it's boring and it's lifeless and it's one dimensional and it's very one dimensional. If you're so terrified of saying something that you personally wouldn't say, but yet your character would say, you're kind of, yeah, you're kind of screwing yourself up. I mean, I know, I've never used the N word. I've never had a reason to. I've never wanted to. I've always figured out a way to get my point across without having to use it. The word offends me that much. I'm using that word because that word probably offends me more than any other word because you also have the entertainment industry treating it like it's okay if other people use it. It's like, no, I think it's wrong, period. I think it's a censorship I can agree with. It's probably the only censorship I can agree with. It's probably the only trigger word. Actually, I wouldn't go even that far. I think it's a trigger word that's overused. I think, look, it's a fact. It's a fact. The word exists. Just like the other word exists. Just like all words exist. Words have meaning. Once you start censoring words and calling them trigger words, you keep, not wanting to use them or confronting them or dealing with them in stories, you're not helping. You're creating one-dimensional characters who no one's going to care about. You have no connection to these people. I mean, it's sad. I think a lot of modern writing when I say modern writing, I mean on all forms of media, is boring. It's boring. It's boring, and it's one dimensional, which makes it boring. I don't know. I think that if you're going to be a writer, you really have to be careful that you don't censor yourself into the point that your characters are one dimensional, but you think they're two dimensional or three dimensional because you're avoiding certain words or certain topics or certain this, that, and the other, or you're couching them in other flowery language. Deleting yourself is supposed to replace suicide. I'm sorry. Deleting deleting is something you do on a computer. Killing yourself is a human act. That's why. Having been there several times, I have been there. I'm not triggered by the word. I know other people probably are. It's sad. But write a story dealing with that. You're supposed to help people get over it. That's the point. Use these trigger words to get people to realize, yeah, I've been there. I know what it feels like. Calling it something else is minimizing it, is diminishing it, is making it less a powerful story idea or a story plot or story anything. Write like it matters. I've written stories on all kinds of subjects. I try to write it like it matters. I don't use trigger words. I mean, I'll write you trigger words in the story if the character is using them, but you know what I mean. I mean, D.H. Lawrence basically saying we need to deal with reality. At least that's what I took away from what I read of his essays in that book I showed. Is that he just said, look, deal with reality. People have sex. People fall in love. They have affairs. They do this, that, and the other. That's called reality. I deal with reality. I don't deal with pretending that reality has to be protected. All of my feelings have to be protected from reality. No. Reality is about dealing with your feelings. It's about dealing with issues. It's about dealing with life and the way life is. I mean, I've read stuff that I don't have any examples because I don't want to make these videos very long, but I should have examples. But I came away with the idea that what Lawrence is saying is, you know what, deal with reality. Okay, you may not agree with it, you may not like it, you may not this, that, and the other, but it is a fact that people do things to each other and to each other. And people make decisions, and people make choices, and people do this, that, and the other. And people are very human, which is why they're human. You see. I like writing. I like dealing with reality. I like dealing with facts. I don't like dealing with trigger words. I don't like dealing with we got to protect the reader's feelings. When we don't, because I'm sorry, that's boring. And it's also lying to your reader. Instead of dealing with real language and what words actually mean, you're hiding behind some political correct wokeism, progressivism, whatever you want to call it. Bullshit. Writing is about telling a story. And if you're going to tell a story about people, you got to deal with people as they are, not as you wish them to be or you want to force them to be. Good characters are hard to write, and I know that. Very good characters are hard to create. Flesh and blood, three-dimensional, everything else characters are difficult to create. I think the human instinct is to make them a little less human than they actually are. Not always, but sometimes it is. I think we get into the frame of mind where we can't make our character too bad. When we realize it, and then when we rewrite, we realize, well, we have to make them bad. I mean, writing is fun. It's enjoyable, and it should be enjoyable. It should be very enjoyable, and it's also a pain in the butt. But I think self-censorship isn't a bad thing as long as you're doing it for the right reason, and that is to get a story across. But I think it should be used sparingly, and I mean sparingly. I mean, deal with reality. Deal with reality. Stories should be about real people. I mean, if there's a genre that doesn't deal with it, that's fine. But if you're dealing with actual human interaction stories, treat people like people. Write them like they're humans, not like they're tropes or caricatures or one-dimensional, afraid of their own shadows. I think it's hard though. I have to admit, it is hard to write a good story and a good character. I don't know if I'm good at it or not, but I keep trying. But anyway. But yeah, I mean, writing should be about the story. Not this fear that you might write or say something that is going to trigger someone or offend them. I read a lot of things that offended me, or tried to offend me. I've read a lot of things that might have triggered me if I cared to be triggered. We do live in the age of I'm a victim of something. That is the age we live in now, unfortunately. Well, I don't want to go past 20, and I'm already on 21. So, anyway, like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Behave yourselves, people, because you know I'm not going to. I might do another video before this day is over. Later.